Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I will go ahead and kind of get things rolling. So, my name is Sabrina. I'm the program coordinator for NAMI Lubbock. For those of you who may not be familiar with NAMI, it's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so we have a Lubbock chapter. And Mrs. Kathryn Wagner had reached out to us a while back. And so we are so happy to be able to partner with her to offer some great information and use her expertise to hold this webinar series. Um, she has a master's degree in couple, marriage, and family therapy from Texas Tech University. And she's also a first year doctoral student there and is a primary instructor in the same program she graduated from, the couple, marriage, and family therapy. Um, Her research emphasis there includes intimate partner violence, trauma, infidelity in couple relationships, and also mental health in the physician population. She is an LMFT associate supervised by Dr. Dane Eggleston, and she operates a private practice in Lubbock, Texas, and also is able to serve throughout the state of Texas via telehealth. You can see more about her at her website, saranovatherapy.com. And I'm sure she'll be happy to take questions about anything that you'd be happy to ask about the presentation if you'll just pop those in the Q&A. And Kathryn, do you prefer to wait till the end for questions, or do you ever want to pause throughout and answer any questions?
Yeah, I have, I think, 2 or 3 places within the presentation, but then also at the end, I have some time for questions too built in. So hopefully
Perfect.
between a couple of those, we'll answer all the questions, or at least with an I don't know, I'll find the answer for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me get back to you on that one. And okay, great. Well,
Right?
please take it away, and I will mute myself and take myself off camera. Thanks so much for being here
Well,
today.
thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. Um, I'm really excited to present over healthy versus unhealthy relationships. Can you see my presentation okay?
Yes, yes, I can see it.
Yes, perfect. Okay, hopefully when I press the present button, it still helps, still
Yeah,
is
you're
able
all
to be seen. Good, good. Well, I think Sabrina did a really great job introducing me because I think she hit my all about me slide. Um, I did get my master's. I just finished that up back in August with the couple marriage and family therapy department at Texas Tech. I'm clinically active right now in my private practice, but I also see clients at the Children's Behavioral Health Clinic, which is tied to Texas Tech through our department, but it is at UMC in the Medical Plaza. And then I also see pediatric oncology patients at the UMC Children's Cancer Center. Between that and then teaching undergrad courses at Tech, I'm pretty busy. But if you have any questions about any of those things, even outside of the presentation, I'm more than happy to connect, answer any questions that you guys might have either about our program or some of these opportunities that are available within the community. So enough about me, what you came here for. Today, we're going to talk about healthy versus unhealthy relationships. And I want to provide you guys with a foundational understanding of what these are, basically, these definitions of what is healthy versus unhealthy. I'm going to give you guys a little introduction into the characteristics of healthy versus unhealthy relationships. However, today I just kind of wanted to dip the toes in the water because the second and third presentations in this webinar series, I'm really going to go much more into depth about the characteristics of healthy relationships. So if you don't feel like you got a whole bunch on those characteristics today, that is intentional. They deserve to have their Hall of Fame moment and a little bit more time and attention to be given to them, and it is upcoming. So if you don't get those, register for the upcoming ones, and hopefully I will get to what you were looking for. And then after that, I'm going to go into what IPV, which stands for Intimate Partner Violence, is, and really give you guys an understanding of what is IPV, what are some of the statistics surrounding IPV, and what is the cycle of relational violence. And then lastly, I did want to share with you guys some of the community resources that are available to the people in Lubbock. And by no means do I think I have created an exhaustive list, but definitely some first steps. If you're a clinician and you need to give your clients some referrals within the community, or if you or somebody you know is a victim of domestic/intimate partner violence, and you're looking to get yourself or them connected to resources. Okay, so this is something that I do in my undergrad classes. I want to give you guys about 1 to 2 minutes, and I want you guys to write down anywhere between 1, 2. I mean, if you want to go crazy, you can write 3. There's no rules, but 1 or 2 questions that you have about this topic. And if you don't have questions at this time, it's okay. Just write down 1 or 2 reasons, maybe why you either registered for this webinar or what you wanted to walk away with, and just keep those questions or those reasonings handy, because I think that it really helps foster whenever I do have time for questions. You're able to see when those times come, if your questions are still unanswered and you've already got something that you thought of, or towards the end of the presentation and you're still needing something that you didn't get, and I can either write it down and give it to you next time, or I can maybe come up with an answer if I have one. And I hear the chat. I don't see the chat, so somebody holler at me if something crazy's going on.
You're all good. I don't see anything in the Q&A or in the chat yet, so I think we're all good.
Perfect.
For
I just hear
there
the
was
little
somebody
boom.
somebody just joined, so if you wanna tell them real
Okay.
quick, about the pre-write activity, that'd be great.
Yeah. Perfect. Just take a minute or 2 to write down 1 or 2 questions that you have about this topic today. Or if you don't have any questions right now, 1 or 2 reasons why you registered for the webinar, or something that 1 or 2 things that you wanted to walk away today with. This is an activity that I like to do at the beginning of class with my undergrad lectures. So that way they already have stuff that they've thought of whenever question time comes around, or they get what they wanted out of the lecture. I'll give about 30, 45 more seconds. Okay, so just keep those handy with you. Don't have to do anything with them yet. You're not going to have to turn them in for any bell ringers or anything. But we're going to go ahead and get started with what are some of these foundational understandings of healthy versus unhealthy relationships. So I like to start on a high note. Healthy relationships, oftentimes in research, is conceptualized as this degree of satisfaction. You'll see in a lot of research studies, marital or couple or relational satisfaction being measured. And now, just because somebody is highly satisfied with their relationship doesn't always mean that it's healthy, but it can be a good indicator. Some other ways that healthy relationships are measured within the research is by relationship flourishing. Weird word for sure. And this research study done back in 2007 started creating this meaning of what relational flourishing is. And it's been measured with 4 dimensions. Meaning, which is the relationship being a source of meaning. So I think a big common misconception is that we have 2 or potentially more partners in a relationship, and we each have a meaning for the relationship. And while, yes, each person does have a meaning for the relationship, couples should really be doing work to establish this relationship as like the third party itself, because we are not just individuals within these relationships. The relationship as a unit is its own entity. And so that relationship has to have a shared source of meaning as itself, even if the two partners have slightly different meanings that they're attributing to it. And then the second dimension being personal growth. So this really means that the relationship is a key source of inspiration for people meeting their goals, people growing into, you know, bigger and better things in their life, for support, for encouragement, and for self-development, which is very similar to goal sharing. And this is a couple's ability to have shared goals. And that's within the relationship, but can also be with career or life goals that are outside of maybe the particular relationship. But it's important that couples are supporting and celebrating each other, while meeting these goals. And then the last dimension is relational giving. And so this one is prioritizing your partner over oneself. And I definitely like this concept, but can see where, you know, if somebody is doing this too much, I always use this analogy: everything in moderation is good. 1 or 2 Oreos a night isn't going to cause any kind of major health problems, hopefully, for a normal, healthy person. However, if we're eating maybe 20 packs of Oreos a night and the whole pack, maybe some health problems could come in there. So there's definitely a component of relational giving that is healthy when you're putting your partner's needs before your own needs. But if we're doing that too much, then that can definitely be unhealthy and causing health problems. I didn't give a dictionary definition of a healthy relationship because I don't necessarily think that there is one definition that is a healthy relationship. Obviously, there's a lot of different theories of therapy or of psychology that would give their own independent definitions of healthy relationships. And they all share some common factors, but I don't think that there's one that is more correct than the others, maybe some components for sure. But I wanted to give you guys more of these broad definitional things of how it maybe is measured and conceptualized in research is a really good thing to point to. Which leads us to unhealthy relationships. This is often measured by the level of distress or the level of adjustment on specific assessments, maybe that you're giving at intake if you're seeing clients, or if you are in a research program. These are maybe like the RDAS, the Relational Dyadic, I think I said that, Relational Dyadic Adjustment Scale. I think that's the acronym. Or the Brief Symptom Inventory, just measuring overall psychological symptoms that somebody is experiencing. Romantic disengagement is something that comes up in the literature that is really big in unhealthy relationships, and it's related to marital disaffection, and they sound like very similar terms, but they do mean slightly different things. So romantic disengagement is a lack of strong positive emotions and relatively few negative emotions at the same time. So it's something that, you know, spouses are disengaged from the relationship. They don't have affection towards the relationship. It's just there. It's almost like, in essence, an indifference. And they are often, you know, within the relationship, less involved in each partner's lives. They speak to each other less frequently. They interact in less intimate ways. And this is similar to marital disaffection, which is a much longer process, but it involves many disappointments, conflicts, and disaffections within the relationship that eventually push the spouses apart. And this one's a lot more of a gradual decline. It's not necessarily that romantic disengagement leads to marital disaffection, but disengagement might be more short term, where, you know, maybe we had a loss within one partner's family and they're really disengaged from the relationship, and maybe that goes a little longer than just the grief process. But this marital disaffection is much more disengaged. We're grown apart. We're stumbling out of love, or my favorite one is the glorified roommates analogy. And those two are really big factors of unhealthy relationships. Other things to consider is, I know that we're going to go into it in a little bit, but is violence, and the utilization of the conflict tactics scale, or the CTS, is something that's really, really popular to pick up violence within intimate relationships. So if you're a clinician here, utilizing CTS measures whenever you're getting a couple for therapy at intake is really, really helpful. I'm currently working on a paper right now that is, first we're doing kind of like, when people are calling to set up a therapy appointment and they're saying, hey, like I'm calling because maybe we have communication issues. Do you think that we could set up an appointment? And then seeing how many are reporting violence as a clinical concern at that point. And then if they're given a checklist, like check what's going on in your relationship that you need help with, how many more people may be identifying violence as a clinical concern to work on in therapy, versus the CTS, which is something that specifically asks, has this happened? How long ago? How often? Much more specific questions. And then right now, with where we're at in the data, which trending is very few people when they call to get therapy services are indicating violence as a clinical concern. So if you are a clinician and you're not incorporating at least the check boxes or a full CTS assessment measure, a lot of people are being missed in terms of reporting violence as a clinical concern. And that's really important information for clinicians to consider. And then any other measure of mental health distress may be an indicator of violence or just overall unhealthiness in the relationship. I just got a paper published back at the end of October that's called The Contributing Factors to Reporting Intimate Partner Violence as a Clinical Concern. And what we did with that one is we took the brief symptom inventory, which is that one I talked about earlier. That's all of these different mental health components, like depression, just overall sadness, dissociation, really just kind of like everything under the sun. And we took scales like the PTSD measure, I forget, it's the MPSSSR, I think it's 3 S's, and things like the RDAS, measuring how adjusted are we within our relationship, and overall, overwhelmingly on all of these assessments. I think the only thing that wasn't significant within our data for that paper was just for males alcohol use, which was surprising, but everything else was significant, saying that the more distressed someone is with their mental health, the more likely it is that there is violence occurring within the relationship. So even if there isn't violence occurring, we should still probably be attuning to some of these mental health issues, because they're going to impact the relationship even when violence isn't occurring. So I don't know if you guys are able to unmute, but take some time. Let me know where you guys are at with healthy versus unhealthy relationships. You can let me know whether you're a clinician and you are looking more maybe for tools, or if you are, not a clinician and you're looking for tools for your specific relationship. Let me know, where are you guys at with this topic?
Okay, I just allowed the mic for attendees, so I think that they should be able
Okay,
to
good.
shout out a question.
I was like, I don't know if it's allowed.
And someone had popped in the chat that they're not a clinician, but just kind of where you're at, whether you're a clinician or not, if you kind of where you're at. I guess you were asking in relation to kind of what you just went over, or
Yeah, being able to, know what is healthy versus unhealthy before I go a little bit more into detail about the characteristics, but not too much, because those are the second
yeah.
and third webinars.
I can say, my name is Roxana Lopez, and
Hi,
I am
Roxanne. I'm glad you're here.
hi. I'm very excited about this. We are able to kind of see sometimes what healthy relationships are and what are not when we're working with our clients every day, kind of seeing their lifestyle and their homes, since we do home visits. But I know on a personal level, sometimes when you're knee deep in, and all of it, you're not able to kind of see what's healthy and what's not healthy until you're out of it. And I think that that's what we kind of see with clients as well.
Yeah. No, that is something I think that happens a lot. I mean, outside of this expertise that Sabrina was saying that I have, Even personally, you always have that friend, or maybe you're that friend at times where something is unhealthy in the moment and you're the one that's not recognizing it. And that can be really challenging to get those people to recognize that that's unhealthy, to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, I just have to chime in and say, you can have all this expertise and still go through, like for instance, you can know all about, anxiety or depression and know all the different ways to, little cognitive skills and ways to check yourself, but
Hmm.
still struggle with it, So, like Roxana was saying, sometimes
Absolutely.
when you're in it, it can be very difficult to, truly see the forest for the trees. Someone had,
Absolutely.
I don't know, can you see the chat, Catherine?
I can't. It
Okay.
doesn't even. Oop, I went further, but it doesn't let me like go back to the team screen while I'm in full screen of the presentation.
One person put in the chat that they need support to be able to get themselves in healthier relationships, because they tend to be kind of drawn toward toxic individuals, and they said unavailable is really kind of what they are drawn toward, right? Not
Yeah.
intentionally, but that's just who they end up kind of with, and so that's kind of like
Yeah.
where that person's at.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I really like about my marriage and family therapist training, is that I'm trained from systemic models of therapy. And systemic models of therapy are based on what's called the general systems theory. A lot of our models came out of this general systems thinking that originated in the world of auto mechanics and then was later transferred to biology. And essentially what it is that we all have these parts that are all mutually influencing each other at the same time. None of these gears are working in isolation. But then there's also a lot of physics concepts that come into play. And so, even as humans in our relationships, we can kind of see that we have this level of what's called homeostasis, or the norm. But the homeostasis doesn't guarantee that it is a healthy homeostasis. It's just what we feel like is normal. And well, just like in physics, things don't like to exert more energy than they have, neither do we. So when we are someone maybe who's been around unhealthy relationships, even in childhood, maybe we had just a more difficult experiences growing up, maybe violence or maybe unhealthy relationship attributes are more normal to us. That's our homeostasis. And so I always tell people, we see people walking up and they have no red flags. And we're like, what is this? I have no idea how to respond. I know how to respond to the chaos or the people who are unavailable, like you had said, but I have no idea how to respond to someone who is available. And that's uncomfortable. And that's a lot of energy to find out those new things. And it's scary and it's unknown. And so we tend to, even if it's unhealthy, try to stay closer to this homeostasis, if that makes sense.
I love that. I think that's a great explanation of, why things tend to kind of stay the same, right? Even though we know they're not
Hmm.
great for us, we have
Yeah,
this kind of set point where we like to stay at.
absolutely. Um, I always tell my clients, if you had a super easy time doing this uncomfortable thing, I would think that you're just like more evolved than the rest of us. But maybe these troubles that you're going through, I like to tell them, it just maybe points to that you're a not maybe normal. I hate using the word normal. I use the Dr. Evil quotes with normal, but you're functioning like you're supposed to. You're conserving energy. I mean, the unknown is scary. We don't know what's over there. So maybe taking some of that pressure off. It's not all you. It's kind of how we were maybe developed to act.
Yeah, and they responded, they said, "Yes, I want to learn how to seek the healthy rather than the chaos," right?
I love it. I love it. Well, hopefully we can give you some of those pointers to, what is it, sage your chaos. Is that what everyone's doing nowadays? Burning the sage. Well, awesome, guys. I will go ahead and move on because I know we only have an hour today. So I wish I could talk about this for all day, but I know other people have jobs or lives or kids or whatever it might be. So we'll keep going. So we'll go ahead and move into some of these characteristics of healthy versus unhealthy relationships. My goal for today, like I told you, was kind of these toes in the water. And so everything in this category that we hear about today, I will try to go into much, much more detail and give more actionable things that you can either practice for yourself or within relationships if you are in one, or practice with your clients if you are a clinician, using some research or some of these theories of some of these bigger names in the couple and relationship therapy world. But today, just a toe dip in the water. And the first thing that I wanted to start with was the types of boundaries. And this is also applicable to communication pathways. So, what are boundaries? Well, I always call them an investment, because I think that right now in the world of TikTok and Instagram Reels, boundaries, I think, sometimes have this connotation of this big brick wall that goes up and you don't let anybody pass them. And then I think that, then they have just this overall negative, connotation to them. And we put, I don't know, when I think of boundaries, I just think of we're cutting somebody out of our lives. And that is not true. That is the furthest from the truth. So I try to reframe this with my clients as boundaries are investments, because if we're not putting up boundaries with people, then they're walking all over what is comfortable for us, or we might be walking over what's comfortable for them. And if we continue to do that, then usually what happens is we kind of let it slide, push it under the rug, explode, and then maybe that relationship is unrepairable. Maybe that's not an option anymore, and now that's not a relationship that we have, or we completely cut someone off and never speak to them again. But if we do boundaries and we don't make them these big high brick walls, but we are clear in the communication with our boundaries, and our boundaries are clear to the people around us, then they're not these big scary things. They give people an idea of what is comfortable to us, what is uncomfortable to us, and hopefully this is an exchange going vice versa, not only in our couple relationships, but all of our relationships, right? Even at work, we could put boundaries up, and then people aren't walking all over us. And so long term, the relationship is going to continue. And so, yes, maybe it's something a little bit scarier, has more of a negative connotation, but they're really crucial to the well-being of a relationship, the longevity of a relationship. So that way nobody is, getting so frustrated to the point where blowing up and cutting things off. And so I'm sure if you look it up, there's a million types of boundaries that are out there in the world today, but there's three main types of boundaries and three main ways to communicate them. And the first one is rigid boundaries. So I think of this as kind of the connotation I was saying that is what comes to mind for me with boundaries, is these are the walls that are super, super high, they're thick, they never come down. I teach this one to maybe my teenagers as, there are some things that has never been said at the dinner table that we can't talk about this, but there's still things you don't talk to dad about. Maybe with my girl teenagers, I say, do you ever go walk up to dad and talk about sex? She's like, absolutely not. I would never do that. Well, did he say you can't? Well, no, but I just know I can't do that. And if I ever do bring it up, it just conversation shuts down, changes the subject. And that's very rigid, right? It's not allowing any new information in. We're not being adaptable. We're turning people away, closing the door, making the conversation shut down. And then conversely, so we have these rigid, super high, thick, can't get through them boundaries, or we can have these diffuse boundaries. And this is maybe the walls are low, non-existent. Maybe it's a little foggy outside, super confusing. We don't know where they start or end. And this is maybe what I was talking more about, of walking all over the uncomfortable territory. So diffuse boundaries, maybe this looks like a parent and a child who are maybe super into each other's business. Like somehow kiddo knows what's going on in mom and dad's troubles with the bedroom. That's probably not a developmentally appropriate relation or conversation to be having for someone who maybe is a minor with their parents going through this. There are maybe different ways in detailing mom and dad's sex life. Or maybe mom is coming into kiddo's room and asking about kiddo's sex life and who their crush is, and and what their thoughts are. And obviously there's an appropriate way to have those conversations, but if mom's asking all of the juicy details, I think of the Regina George mom in Mean Girls. That's kind of those diffuse boundaries. So the abnormal, like, oh, you girls keep me young, into the conversation is a little bit more of what I'm speaking to here than maybe a parent just taking an active interest in a kid's life. That's a good thing. And so rigid and diffuse are both unhealthy types of boundaries. Our walls shouldn't be too high or too confusing. We should be aiming for clear boundaries and clear ways to communicate them. And so the way that we achieve this is being able to, I always tell my clients, it's hard to keep your boundaries if you don't know where they come from. So I always start with having them list out the core values that they have in life, maybe the origins of these core values, because usually our boundaries come from those morals and values that we, have in our heads of how the world should work. So if you haven't ever sat down and written a list about what those are, I always encourage people to do that, because it's going to be really hard to, maybe not as hard to make them, but harder to solidify and actually utilize boundaries if you don't have a reasoning behind why you created it. But if you have something to look towards and say, I really value going to family movie night on Friday nights because family and quality time is a core value of mine, and this is something protected. And so whatever relationship I develop in the future is someone who I want to be able to support a either weekly movie night or a family game night once a week. So now we have a boundary, also maybe like a criteria checkbox whenever we're going into, dating or, redating someone potentially. But we also know, hey, why is this here? Oh, because I value quality time. I value investments in other people. And so it's much easier to keep those boundaries there and be firm in your boundaries and clearly state them out loud to people. Disney really did us all dirty. I know that Ariel didn't talk for a whole movie and somehow the prince knew everything she was thinking, but that's not how we work as human beings. So we have to say them out loud, because your partner or potential partners don't know what's going on inside your head. And so those should be overt, but they should also be flexible and adaptable. They shouldn't be immovable. We should be having conversations. If someone maybe wants to go past your boundary, you ask them why. Like, what's the context around this? Maybe we need to skip family game night this week because I just have a lot of work and it's stressing me out. And then we negotiate. Yes, that's okay. That I'll let you pass for right now, but your ticket out is on this day at this time. And then you have to renegotiate if you want to go through again. So that's the very big important thing about clear boundaries, is we're being flexible and adaptable with the people around us, but not giving them a free pass to continually pass that boundary, only for a certain amount of time if we think the context of the situation makes sense for them to pass. Here's a little visual. So we have our healthy boundaries. We have some little cracks around it just in case. We can be flexible. But these limited, non-existent, or loose, porous boundaries are, ways that people can wedge themselves and maybe, I say manipulate. Technically, the word manipulate doesn't have to have a negative connotation, but most of the time it does. But maybe they manipulate the things that we do or the outlooks that we have because of so many cracks. Or we have a rigid wall and it doesn't even allow us room or space to grow and change things for ourselves. And it doesn't let anybody in to help support us either. This was the best visual that I felt like I could find. I'm sure there are better ones, but for some reason, I feel like I've seen better ones. But those weren't coming up for me when I was preparing this presentation.
This is a great diagram. Love it.
Perfect. Good. I was like, this looks good. But then I don't know. I think it's because it's grainy. I'm like, I don't know how good it really is. Okay. Well, I will then turn it back over to you guys. What do you look for in healthy relationships? So if you're a clinician and a couple client comes in, what are you looking for from them to say like, okay, they're in a healthy relationship, or to measure health in the relationship? If you are not a clinician, you are someone who has a partner already, like how do you know your relationship is in a healthy place? Or if you don't have a partner and you're looking for partners and you're on the market, then what are you looking for in those potential partners to know that they are someone healthy to develop a relationship with?
Okay, everybody, the mic should be open if you wanna talk, or pop it in the chat. We have somebody that is typing something, so I'll let you know.
I don't bite, I promise.
Okay.
I'm being kinder to you guys. Whenever my students look at me, and granted, I teach in the morning, so I feel bad for them. But I say, if you don't ask me questions, then I'm going to assume that it's okay for me to ask you questions. But you guys got off lucky. I can't see who's in the meeting anymore, so I won't do that today.
Okay, Melissa said, someone that is caring and kind and prioritizes my needs too.
I like it. It sounds like you know
And
what to look for. It's
someone
easier
else.
said than done, right? Because we have those check boxes, and then all of a sudden life gets in the way, and then it gets a little murky.
Oh yeah, I think sometimes biology can get in the way of, like you have this attraction to this person. I remember I saw a comedian one time and they were like, whenever I'm immediately animalistically attracted to somebody, he said he cursed, so I'm not going to say that part, but he's like, I know to turn around and get right out of that room because he's like, he knew he was like attracted to the wrong people. Um,
Right?
Okay, somebody else said, Brandy said, someone who's open to communication and doesn't see it as nagging.
I like it. And I think, especially, when we're talking about stereotypical gender differences, I always like to kind of give this context to my clients or use this analogy. And it uses some stereotypes, so I apologize for that. But I call it the locker room analogy. When we think back to high school locker rooms, if you are maybe the stereotypical female, granted, there are exceptions and I acknowledge those, but stereotypically, if you're in the locker room getting ready after practice and some girl is not making eye contact with you, like you're talking to her and she is not speaking to you or just flat out ignoring you in your entire existence, that means she hates you, right? It's your best friend who you're saying, hey, you really hurt my feelings. You're crying with them, even if it's within the relationship, maybe after a little time separately. But typically, as a female, stereotypically, as a female, the closer you are with someone, the more you're telling them the vulnerable feelings that you have going on inside, even if it has something to do with the relationship. If you hate them, you don't waste time on them in the female world, generally speaking. Now, conversely, if you think to the male locker room, the 16 smelly, hormone raging locker room full of Axe deodorant spray, if the guy is just kind of giving you a pat on the back, like, whatever, not saying a few words, like, your best mates, like your bros, like everything's good. Now, if someone is talking to you about, how upset they are, usually that is also combined with maybe getting a little bit puffier, maybe getting ready to swing. And so I tell this to clients because even though it's not every single case scenario, I feel like that's how a lot of the stereotypical like heterosexual relationships work when I see couples in couples therapy. Whenever women are bringing up these things in communication, like this isn't going well in the relationship, men almost look at it as all of a sudden their wives or their girlfriends or partners are starting to grow 6 inches and get like huge Dwayne the Rock Johnson muscles and they're about to end the relationship, when really for females, that's how we're connecting. And so I think it's really important to try to look at it from that perspective because it gives a little bit of breaths of, oh, well, maybe he's going and thinking that I'm about to end the relationship and he's trying to avoid me thinking of him in that life. Now, obviously, that's not the healthiest pattern to be in, but that's where I like to start to give people some of that empathy for their partner and maybe the way that society has kind of conditioned the difference between male and females. But that's a great point. Not communication isn't nagging. Sometimes it can be. I'm guilty of it. All right, guys. Well, let's keep going. So here are some characteristics of healthy relationships. These are generically speaking, broad categories, and there's a lot of different ways to meet these. But this was actually on the domestic violence hotline website, and they had a few more, but I kind of changed some of them as I was going through with just like what I've read in the literature, just some of the experience that I've had. So word for word, definitely not what was on the website, but it was based on some of those domestic violence hotline website points that they had. But generally in healthy relationships, they feel safe. And what I mean by safe is you do not feel like you are going to be coming into physical or maybe even psychological harm. Now, this might be different than my husband might not do this certain thing, or my boyfriend might not do this certain thing, and that hurts my feelings. That is one thing. I'm talking about they will try to control me or have power over me, or they will maybe hurt me physically or cause me bruises. Like I am fearful in the relationship. And so a healthy relationship feels generally safe. You know that even in the shortcomings, you're still gonna feel safe. The next one, we kind of just talked about this, but is having the clear communication where, we're being flexible, we're being adaptable, we're not flooding with our emotions, or, I like to think of the Drake song, the 0 to 100 real quick, or seeing red, or whatever analogy you want to use. But we are able to talk out loud very clearly about our expectations of what's comfortable and uncomfortable, and we're respecting those. And then next is feeling secure. So when we're communicating about our needs or even our wants or our boundaries or whatever it might be, we trust that our partner is listening to these, but also will take them in consideration, and that we feel secure enough that they will honor that going forward. Problem solving that's constructive. So I mean, I wouldn't be married if I didn't know that fighting happens. Even as a therapist, I admit it. Do not have this perfect cookie cutter relationship. We've got problems too, definitely. But problem solving, having arguments, disagreement, conflict isn't this big bad thing that it often gets this rap for, but it can be. It definitely can be. But if we can make constructive problem solving experiences, we are using active listening strategies, all of this stuff that I will be going into in the next few webinars, then that's the healthy way to have conflict, to manage conflict. And so conflict in and of itself doesn't mean the relationship is bad, doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. But it can if it's very unhealthy. Next, fostering trust. I will be going into this in later lectures, but a lot of the things that I use in couples therapy is based on the Gottman work. And they did a lot of research into creating what's called the sound relationship house theory, which I will give you guys a little bit more information into that in later webinars. However, one of the key components to their theory is trust and commitment. And if you do not trust your partner or feel a commitment to your partner, or you don't feel like they trust you or are committed to you, typically the relationship probably isn't going to be that healthy. And then lastly, equitable. So I put a little star because this is the biggest one that I changed. The website said equals, and I like that word, I do. However, I mean, realistically speaking, a marriage, a relationship is never 50-50 100% of the time. And that's okay. Housework is never 50-50. I mean, anybody who's a wife in here knows that. But equitable, are we agreeing on the split? If maybe I do 70% of the housework and my husband does 30, well, maybe he does 70% of the outside work and I do 30. So although we're not at 50-50, we're equitable in our division. We agree on that. That's something that we use clear communications and boundaries, problem solving that was constructive to come to that conclusion. So I feel like equals means 50-50 in everything. And that's just really unrealistic. Life happens. Sometimes, you come home from work and you're not able to give 50. I've been there. But it's just important to be able to say to your partner, when can you not give 50%? How much percent can you give? Who can pick up somebody else's extra percent that they can't give? And are we agreeing that, that we can do that in that moment? So I like equitable just a little bit better than equal. And then all in all, so if you are a clinician, I love Carl Whitaker and symbolic experiential therapy. I use a lot of different components in therapy from different models as well, but I really, really like his model and his process of change. And this is a kind of at the foundations of his model. And this is something that I live by personally and as a couples therapist. But healthy relationships, in my brain, it makes sense that the whole point is to balance being an individual. So being yourself, who you are, and being unique, and belonging to either, your couple relationship, your families of origin or families of choice, that we're never too far into one or the other, because if we're too much in our individuation, maybe we don't feel connected to these other people. If we feel too connected to these other people, maybe we've lost ourselves. So I like to find the balance. I never think it's always one or the other. Our world is not too perfect and cookie cutter for those answers all the time, but balance is something we can find, or contentness on what's going on. And so this is just a really, really good way to think about what are healthy relationships. Well, they balance me feeling confident in myself and who I am as a unique individual, and they foster a sense of belonging, that I'm accepted within this group or within this relationship for who I am at the same time. So a lot of these components of unhealthy relationships are quite frankly the opposite of what I talked about on the other slide, but lacking or having unclear communication. These relationships might feel isolating, and that's different from a partner intentionally isolating their part, or I guess one partner isolating another partner, but maybe the relationship just feels isolating. Or it can be more, coercive isolation, like you can't hang out with someone, but that is a little bit more of the violence category. And so it can occur without maybe being a violent relationship. Feeling pressured, and that's maybe to do things, or feeling pressured to say yes to things. It feels disrespectful. Maybe there's a lot of name calling going on. Lacks trust and honesty. If you feel like your partner isn't being honest with you, or you don't have trust in them, it's going to be very, very difficult to foster a healthy relationship. Well, I guess I put feels pressured twice, so that one is very important. Just kidding, it was an accident. And then lacks safety and security. So if you don't feel safe or secure in your relationship, it's going to be very, very hard to foster a healthy relationship. We'll go into those characteristics more. I'm excited for it. But I want to know at this point what questions that anybody might have. I'll take maybe one or two, so that way we can get to the end.
Not seeing anything in the chat yet. While people are thinking, I gotta say, I love that the balance between individuation and, because I lean more toward like rigid boundaries. I lean more toward individuation because I'm afraid more of, the other side of it, of
Yeah.
losing oneself. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I love that. What did you say Whitaker's that therapy was symbolic something?
Symbolic experiential.
Experiential. Okay, cool. I just wanted to look
Mm-hmm.
at that. Oh, yes,
And,
Melissa had
and
asked. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you're good.
Melissa asked earlier, will if they would like a copy of the slides, would they be able to get a copy of them afterwards?
Yeah. I can't remember if my email. Let me look real quick and see if it's at the end. I can put that once I finish the presentation. I can put it in the chat, and then
Okay,
just email me, and I can send you a copy of those.
perfect. I think that
Thank you
was
for
all the
asking.
questions. Yeah, she had asked about that earlier.
Perfect. Well, we will keep rolling, and then if you guys have anything else, the next opportunity for questions, unless I built another one that I am forgetting, will be at the end. Okay, so what is IPV? So IPV stands for intimate partner violence. I think it's just a little fancier word than domestic violence, but that's really what it is. So if you hear domestic violence, that is synonymous with IPV. This is just the term that we utilize more in research. IPV in and of itself is abuse or aggression that occurs in romantic relationships. There's a lot of different prevalence rates. I feel like if you look at different statistics from different sources, however, at this point, I think 1 in 3 women is where the current statistics lie for physical, like at some point in their lifetime will experience physical abuse or aggression within one of their intimate relationships. So about 33% of women within the United States are going to be experiencing physical abuse or intimate partner violence. And that's contrasting to about 1 in 4 males. So about 25% of males sometime in their lifetime in their intimate relationship will experience physical abuse or aggression. And that is contrasting with psychological aggression. So we have about, I think about half is where the current statistics are in some of the studies that they've recently come out with. Half of the people in the United States, and I think the studies were inclusive of European individuals, because Europe has started to pass a lot of laws that have actually made psychological violence within the couple relationship just as much penalized as more physical violence. And I think we're starting to see some of that come up in the United States with some of these. I don't know if you guys have seen where some women have had previous partners exploit some nude pictures of themselves to other individuals after the fact, which that is a form of psychological violence. And that I think is starting to be, I'm forgetting the word, not legalized. That's the opposite.
Criminalized?
Prosecuted. Criminalized, prosecuted, those words. That has been things that are becoming prosecutable offenses in the United States. So because it's so prevalent. Some risks associated with IPV are just overall negative mental health symptoms that can be experienced, but also physical health symptoms. Individuals who experience intimate partner violence are more likely to have depression, suicidality, more likely to abuse substances like alcohol or drugs. They're more likely to have heart problems with muscles within their bodies, having chronic pain, and develop symptoms of PTSD. So a lot of health consequences, a lot of mental health consequences. But all in all, I think the number is, I think it's either 3.6 or 4.6, and I want to say 3.6 trillion. I think back in 2018, they did a study on how much IPV is costing American taxpayers because of hospitalizations or just overall, I guess hospitalization. There's something else within that study, but just how much it was costing. And $3.6 trillion is how much that IPV is costing the government because of injuries or other child care issues that are related to the fallout of intimate partner violence. So not only are we seeing health risks, we're seeing economic risks as well. So overall, if you are a clinician or not a clinician, IPV is something that, I think clinicians sometimes might go a little, like they approach with caution because it's, the big bad scary with what we deal with. And oftentimes with different models for therapy, IPV is a contraindication for treatment. However, I do want to be able to give you guys a distinction. So there is what's called situational intimate partner violence, which is violence that's not embedded in a general pattern of controlling behaviors. It's rooted in maybe like stresses of family life or financial issues, and it has to do with a certain situation, and it's not maybe necessarily going on every single day. It's typically bi-directional, so both partners are engaging more often than not in situational IPV. Maybe emotional flooding is going on or emotional dysregulation. However, this is contrasting with intimate partner terrorism, which is an attempt to dominate one's partner and exert a general control over the relationship. So this is maybe what you might see when people have narcissistic personality disorder. This is typically when we see violence going in one direction with a relationship. And couples therapy is absolutely definitely contraindicated for intimate partner terrorism. If intimate partner terrorism is occurring, I don't know what couples therapists would provide any kind of conjoint treatment. The best case scenario, I think, in a lot of situations of intimate partner terrorism is being able to get the victim of that type of violence outside of the situation into some of these resources, supports, a different living situation, whatever it might be, potentially like doing individual therapy with both partners. And then, once that risk, it's a very low likelihood that couples therapy would really ever be, prevalent within intimate partner terrorism. However, situational IPV might be possible for couples to do couples therapy with. And something that I look for whenever situational IPV is occurring is if both partners are agreeing on the type of violence. If they're agreeing on the direction, the frequency, the type of violence, whether it's sexual, physical, psychological going on, if both partners are saying the same thing, that's like step one for me. Okay, we're agreeing. If the partner who is perpetuating violence, or both partners who are perpetuating violence, accept accountability, that they agree, like, yes, I did this. They accepted ownership, like I take ownership for what I have done in this cycle, which is different than, we're not victim blaming. And I want to make that clear. Like, if somebody is a victim in intimate partner terrorism, it is not up to them to be able to control their partner's violent outbursts, right? It's not on them. They didn't do anything to cause their partner to hit them. What I'm meaning by this is if a partner is perpetuating violence, they're saying, yes, I perpetuated violence in this way. So they're taking accountability for the violence that they may have perpetuated. There's a willingness to change. So a couples therapist might ask them to sign no violence contracts where there is a cessation of violence at the entire duration of any couples therapy treatment. If violence occurs, we immediately stop couples therapy at any point in time. We may do individual therapy. Maybe you can't come to me, whatever it is. So if situational IPV is occurring and all of those things are checking out, couples therapy might be possible for those couples. So I'll really quickly go into these different types of IPV. I know we're kind of getting to the last 5 minutes, so I'll just go over these a little bit, and then I will elaborate a little bit more on them if there's any questions over them in the next webinar. But the first type is physical IPV, and this is just when a person is hurt or tries to hurt a partner by any means that is a physical force. And this includes maybe all of the things that are coming into mind, but also using a body to block an exit to a room. So if maybe two partners are arguing and one partner gets big in the doorway and says you can't leave, that is using physical force, physical aggression, and that is constituting physical intimate partner violence. Sexual violence now is separate, but a lot of times in the research, researchers will combine statistics for sexual and the physical throwing, slapping, punching violence. And sexual violence is just coercion to do sexual acts when a partner does not consent. And then typically when physical IPV is present, so is psychological IPV. Not always. Like, I was gonna put that in the slide, but then I'm like, I don't know when it wouldn't. I have never seen just physical and not psychological, but maybe there'll be a case in my future that challenges that. But it's not always physical means there's also psychological, but most likely. And then psychological IPV, this is estimated to be the most common form of IPV. Like I said, about 50% of individuals will probably experience psychological IPV within the course of their lifetime. I included stalking here just because sometimes stalking might be considered physical IPV if there's any active physical aggression. However, if there is no contact or unwanted attention, it might be psychological and give, the victim paranoia. So I think that depending on the context, it can go in either category. But this is just any kind of psychological aggression. This might be financial control. Now, maybe if, basic needs aren't being met, that might go more in the physical category too. But typically, like if we're controlling how much money we can spend and it's not due to like lack of resources, if we have a certain amount of resources and we're denying people getting things, saying you can't hang out with people, intentionally isolating anybody, the famous gaslighting, telling people, their reality is not real, utilizing different components of verbal abuse or any kind of psychological control will go here. In the research, psychological IPV is just as distressing to people's mental and physical health as physical IPV. So I want to make that clear that although I think that, just widely across our judicial systems or our law enforcement agencies, that usually physical IPV is the only time that I feel like they'll intervene, and that might be a stereotype, and I might, be wrong there. There's probably definitely instances that they're intervening for psychological IPV. However, statistics say that psychological and physical IPV cause about this statistically negligent in a difference of the amount of distress that they're causing. So they're feeling like the same. I will go into these types of verbal abuse and these resources next time, just because I know it's 1 o'clock, and if anybody's got anywhere to be, I want them to get there. But I really want to thank you guys for coming out today. Obviously, I love to talk about this topic and probably could have made a 3-hour lunch and learn if I needed to and still had more to say, but feel free to go on my website. You can fill out a Google form if you have any questions. Let me stop sharing my screen and I'll type in my email. Make sure I spelled everything right. Here is my email. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I always tell people, like, even if you don't think, I would be a good fit for therapy for you, but you are looking for a therapist, I'm always happy to help anybody find a therapist within the area who might have openings and be a good fit. We kind of all work together. We're on this together, like High School Musical. But I really, really enjoy this topic, and I cannot wait to give you guys more information next time and pick back up on some of those things that we ran out of time for today.
Really, really great. Thank you so much. I'm excited for the next ones. So just
too.
for everybody on, the next one will be 11/28, right? And
Yes.
so we'll send out the link for that webinar registration soon. It'll look very similar to the one that we already sent out. And if you have any questions, email Kathryn, or you can email program at NAMI Lubbock dot, is it org? Oh no. Is it org or com? I don't even remember.
I think it's, and then here's me. I just had it pulled up a second ago too.
Oh man.
I think it's at .com.
Is it .com? Okay.
Because the main NAMI Lubbock email is
.com. Okay. Oh.
.com, yeah.
Oh man, thank you so much.
If it's not .com, it's .org.
That's right. If it bounces back, it's .org. Well, thank you so much, Kathryn. This was amazing.
Absolutely.
And with your permission, we'll post it on our NAMI
Yes,
website.
absolutely.
The recording.
I request
so we can...
a copy of the recording too, because
Okay.
I would love to hear myself talk and be like, ugh.
Oh, I hate hearing myself talk. But anyway,
Me too.
yeah, we'll get that posted on there. And so everybody have a great day. Thank you so much, Kathryn.
Thanks, guys. Have a great one.
Bye, everybody.